All right, it's 5:30, gentlemen. So call the meeting to order.
Roll call.
Roll call. I'm here. Jason Franks.
Yes.
Steve Jordan.
Yes. Okay. Review of the 2025 permanent appropriations. If you guys open your packet up, it'd be really if you get to the third page of it, I think, or second page, 2025 revenue. And what I've done on there is I've highlighted the items that in green that have increased for each fund, and or red if it's decreased. And most of that, the biggest portion of that is due to carryovers. You know what we originally thought might carry over from one year to the next. So our revenue, actually, based off of our temporary budget, to this one is going to increase approximately $475,000. You see that on the bottom right? I totaled it down the side. Okay, and then on the total 2025 total expenses, the next page, this is all by fund level. The total expenses increased by 348, so about 450,000. So actually, our revenue should be up higher than what our expenses were based off the temporary budget. Most of the funds, the revenue increased more than what the expenses did, except for a handful of them, which I can go through those if you're interested in it, or if you guys want details on them. The biggest changes were there were some additional items that Brian asked that I put in the budget that we didn't originally put in the temporary budget. Was some additional meter replacements. It's 74,000. They want to do some fire hydrant replacements, and they're also looking at buying a new Bobcat, because the skid loader they have is just, they've been having troubles, and the guy that at the shop said they'd probably be better off buying something upgraded instead of continue to repair the one they've got. And he also wants to upgrade one of the gators so we can stay on top of, that way we're not getting older equipment. Basically, the other big changes on the fund levels were the carryovers, some of the projects that we thought were going to be finished up by the end of the year, mainly the if you look at Fund 4902, the Department of Development Infrastructure Grant. That's the water tower refurbishing. Unfortunately, we didn't get a final billing from the contractor before the end of the year to be able to close that out. So that Brian had applied for an extension, so that's why those numbers went up so much compared to what we originally had in the budget.
Which bucket was that?
That's 4902.
It's like 6 from the bottom, I think, on the
fund,
revenue.
fund level.
Gotcha. Yep. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. So and if you look at the water and sewer funds, those went up, I would say, somewhat substantial, but a lot of that is due to the fact that we never, we didn't finish paying for the engineering on the water treatment plant, and part of that's coming out of sewer, because you obviously have to have water to be able to operate a sewer. So that's where, there was, I think, total, we adjusted some of the line items in the budget, but total budget went up 40,000 and 27,000 for those. On the other big change was on the police fund. George is pretty sure he has found another officer, which I'll let him talk to council about that if he's ready to make that recommendation. I'm not sure where he's at, but he's pretty sure he's got another officer. So his expenses, the revenue stayed the same. We didn't change anything there. We just won't have as much carryover into 26 as we thought we might have. But if he gets this officer hired, another full-time officer hired, he obviously needs more budgeted for salary. So those were the major changes.
Okay.
If anybody had questions, they want to go through each specific fund. On the pages that follow, I've got each fund listed and what I highlighted for what changes in the amounts were. In the general fund, Ryan did ask for an additional. We originally had 20,000 in capital outlay, but he wanted to increase to 40 because he wants to do some sidewalks and some updates out in the park. So that was one of the major changes in there. But to offset that, he did get an agreement set up for the splash pad operations. Should be around 10,000 instead of the original 30 that we thought we were going to. So that saved the 20,000 basically just moved from one
Shifted. Okay.
Shifted. The rest of it was basically salaries and stuff that, with the raises that we discussed, or council approved, we had to adjust the salaries there. Street budget change was basically our carryover. We didn't have, at one time Brian was planning on doing a Bourbon Street paving, but he's moving that into this year because he's hoping to get some of the water lines maybe replaced before they do the pavement on that project.
So where does that hit in here if it's an expense? Is that 5101? You're doing water lines or you have a main?
No, well, the water lines are under, the water lines are under the water, yes. It would be under your water fund. Now the street repair falls under the street fund, which is 2011 at the top.
So if you have a main break and you got to dig up part of the street, it hits both buckets?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, if we have to bring somebody in to repair the street or cost that would be out of that. The portion that's the street repair goes underneath that.
Gotcha.
If you guys don't have a whole lot of other questions, well, I guess I'll ask for it when we have the ordinance, so the resolution read, that somebody makes a recommendation to approve the.
All right, will the other councilmen, I'll get this before.
They will get the resolution that we had in the council packet that shows, so the county only makes us do a breakdown of the total expenses. That's all they want. So basically the resolution is going to have these figures here that's on your expense line item that shows the budget set at $3,694,000.
Okay.
So that's what's going to be in
So
there.
they get all the.
They get all-
They just not all the guts of it.
They don't have all the guts of it,
Okay.
and I'll have the guts if somebody would have a question at a council meeting. but-
Right. Well, and truthfully, I mean, I could have you go through other guts of all of it with us, but I'm not gonna follow half the stuff anyway.
I mean, like I said,
That's
the
why.
biggest, I mean, obviously the revenue increase was, the big part of it was that the water tower refurbishing grant, and a lot of that you see where these changes were made were carryovers from the previous year. You know, we thought we might have some of the expenses come out in
Right.
24, they didn't come out, so we had more carryover in the fund balance than what we did from the previous year. I mean, for example, like the street budget, the carryover balance was $19,813 higher than what we originally anticipated. So that's, you know, out of the $20-some thousand dollars of change in revenue on the street fund, that's, you know, 20,000 was from carryover.
Okay.
So it looks like police is really going up. 3-year average is 242. We're budgeting 357.
Correct, because of, for the last 3 years, he hasn't had any full-time officers except for himself.
Right.
So you start adding in benefits, plus salary and everything, plus the pension, that's where that additional increase comes into play.
But we need them, so,
Yep.
I mean, we kind of skated by, I guess,
Yeah.
relative to having not enough people and getting, obviously you don't have to pay if you don't have people, but we need the people.
Right.
EMS.
EMS budget.
Yeah, we have.
So we did increase that, that's just, basically, that was from that went up 12,750. That was done, I did that myself, because I've looked at the amount of expenses they've had for supplies in relation to what we had in the budget before, and the cost of the supplies with inflation has just got up, so I just raised that. So if you go back to the EMS budget, you can see supplies and materials I raised,
Where are you going?
each,
How do I follow?
keep going through there.
Okay. Oh, so these are breakdowns.
Breakdowns of each fund.
Okay.
So your
About 10.
supplies went up 2,250. That's just due to, you know, what we've spent. Like last year, we spent almost $24,000 in supplies in comparison to, in 22 it was almost 18,000. 23 was only 14, but last year was almost $24,000. So I increased. Originally, we only had the budget set at 25,000, but you know, with inflation and everything, I figured we better increase that amount because they do have a lot of carryover. So it's not like the fund is in an emergency state where they're not going to be able to afford to have the additional expenses. And capital outlay for machinery and equipment, that was just due to they're going to be receiving another $6,000 grant for that grant funds coming in. If you look at the top, you see the $6,000 increase in state restricted grants. So I increased that from the original 5,000 to, which we originally had it set at 5,000, but you can see that we've spent, you know, last year was 6,500, 22 was almost 7,000, and almost 14,000 in 23. So try to get this set so we don't have to make a bunch of
I was gonna say,
adjustments throughout the year. But the whole
Right,
point behind it.
exactly.
Because if you don't have it budgeted, you can't spend it. So if something comes along, then basically we have to have an emergency ordinance to change the budget.
So, amount available for expenses, is that actually what's in a bucket somewhere?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, so sorry, I'm a
Yeah,
newbie.
yeah, I understand. No
Sorry.
problem.
Other chart, so at the top you got revenue.
Are you looking at the EMS one still?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, yeah.
Yep.
So 90 grand comes in, so total,
So
137 comes in,
Yep.
and where are we at? We're budgeting.
192.
And we're gonna lose 70 grand on.
Well, a lot of that's carryover, and we typically don't spend that much. But again, that is if you look at the 22, 23, and 24 expenses,
Yeah.
you're talking 114, 119, 128.
Oh yeah.
So we're typically spending, but it increases every year. We do leave, like I said, we leave extra budgeted for the fact if an emergency comes through. If we don't budget for a repair and let's say the garage doors break on the door or on the thing down there, we have to basically have an emergency meeting with council to approve that repair if we don't have that budgeted in the line item to make that repair.
Yeah.
I mean, we're budgeting higher than what we expect to expend in all these things.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand
Yep.
right now.
We were here last year for all this, set through this
Yeah.
road, like all these
Yeah.
things. So that's why, I mean, I get your question there. That's a good
Yes,
question,
it is.
but that's what it is. Basically, it's preventing us from having to go back and try to. It's being proactive, essentially.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is what it is. So.
Refresh me, I should know this, the FOJ, what is that?
Furtherance of Justice. That is a fund.
Say it
Basically,
again?
the Furtherance of Justice Fund. It's a fund that the police department controls. George has that basically for if he need to pay for evidence in a case or something. For
Oh,
example,
okay.
like if there was a murder and he had to buy the gun from somebody or something along those lines. It's just he wouldn't have to wait for me to come in and cut a check for him. He can just write a check
Yeah.
and we'll take care of that right now at that point. You know, any type of investigation where he would have to spend a little bit of money out of it for investigative purposes.
There are salaries with EMS, right?
Correct.
Is that the top line
That's
item?
that personnel service or personal services. Yep.
Okay.
Which council did the 5% raise, so I increased everything by at least 5% there. I mean, obviously they may have more or less runs the next year, so I want to make sure we have enough. Try to have enough budgeted on those line items. And then the EMS billing clerk would also fall underneath that line item too.
It's a really nice breakdown.
And like I said, the police budget, you can see, if you go where EMS, you go 2 pages, it'd be the police. You can see where the major changes are there. Well, and the other thing that was changed on all these that I guess I failed to mention until looking at was hospitalization was increased on almost every fund due to the fact we had a 17% increase in the cost of health insurance, which wasn't budgeted in October when we did the temporary budgets because at that time we didn't know where we were going to stand. George had talked to me prior to making the budget that he wanted me to plan for another officer. So we were semi-close until he came back and told me what he thought he was going to offer this individual for salary. And that's why, since he'll be full-time, instead of having it under OPERS, it'll be under the Ohio Police and Fire. So that, part of the money come out to cover the difference come out of the OPERS because we won't be paying as much for part-time officers anymore. And like I said, the water and sewer, one of the major changes in those was the engineering that needed to be completed on the water treatment plant once we get that final billing. Which I assume that won't probably come in until EPA finalizes their determination on that. And then the engineer will decide if changes need to be made.
Is there a list of capital projects that are planned, like that make up the budget?
Well, the list that Brian gave me was, Mervyn Street repavement. He wants to replace the pickup trucks. or one of the trucks. They had a truck quit on them last year. He had asked for an additional $40,000 for that, so we took some of that out of water, sewer, some of it out of streets, some of it out of the parks department. Additional street repairs of another $40,000 that he has planned, and then he had asked for $40,000 in the parks budget for, like I said, sidewalks and updates. I know he's looking at possibly doing some updates to the shelter house or something along those lines. As far as the Canal Wentworth project, the amount that's in the budget is not going to be anywhere close to cover the cost of it. Brian's hoping to get funding from some source. So if that happens, we may have to revise the budget. But we did put in, I think, the Canal Wentworth project. I think it's under the waterline capital or water fund capital outlay. There's $100,000 there, and then I think we also put it under storm sewer because we're replacing those lines as well. And I think we put 115, so that's only $215,000. That's probably a couple $1 million project. So we're hoping that we don't have to obviously stand the whole $2 million or whatever it's going to be. We haven't got an estimate on it until they finish up engineering, because then they'll be able to have an idea what it's actually going to cost.
Yeah.
So we really couldn't budget for that.
They're not involved in getting that.
They're close. They're 97% complete with the engineering last time anyway, but I don't think I haven't received any other billings on that here lately, so I don't know if that's something they're submitting those, well, because they did submit that to the railroad, I believe, for approval, so they're probably waiting on that approval before they move forward with finalizing it. Brian you have to ask Brian on that. Like Schaefer Road and stuff, if that's what you're asking about, no, none of that is budgeted at this time, because we obviously don't know where the funding's coming from or anything. So.
All the variables.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking about like water lines and things because we've brought that up a few times, and I mean, I didn't know Brian had put them in his plan, like sort of
Just that one on Mervyn Street, that Mervyn Street replacement.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think you're gonna have to do engineering before you can start budgeting capital for those projects.
Yeah. Yep. Is the engineering in the budget then? Is that part of it?
There is some engineering in the general fund, because obviously if it was something that was not for water or sewer or anything specific, so Brian's asked for a water or a line item for engineering for building and grounds in the general fund, and I think it's 75,000. Yes, 75,000. So in the general fund on page 3, that was in there during the temporary budget. So if you go to lands and building, about halfway down the page, right underneath the second highlighted green item, there's an engineering services in there, 75,000.
Yep. Got it.
Which, last year we spent about 38,000 in engineering. The year before was about almost 50,000. So hopefully we don't spend the full 75, but obviously you don't know what the full.
Yeah, that's really where the improvements start.
Yes, they have to go through the engineering before they can do anything else. Questions or anything else you guys want to review before you want? Like I said, the changes are, we're showing more revenue than what we initially anticipated, and in excess of what the additional expenses are. From the village standpoint, the carryover should be about the same as what we've always carried over. Or any past. And we never spend, or I shouldn't say never. We typically don't spend anywhere near the total budget.
Right.
I mean, like last year we were $4.5 million. I think we were just over $3 million what we spent. So.
She said like the building, the
You try to build it into cover additional proactive work. Yes. If you guys don't have any other questions on that, then I would like to request a motion to move to executive session to discuss pay and compensation of employees. You'll do that?
Any second?
You move. Or second?
I'll do it.
Jason. Roll call. We will after we go to move to executive.
So roll call for
Executive.
Jason,
Jason, you're yeah?
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
The resolution is
And the packet. I got him, he changed some of the verbiage to Ohio Revised Code stuff too. And I'm gonna have the hard ones for you guys at the meeting, but, so that's in the packet for the first reading. So it will be the first reading, so basically you got 2 or 3 months, well, in March is when we'll actually be voting on it, so at that time, I guess if you guys want to say, we, as the finance committee,
we went over it.
we agreed with the changes.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Nice job.
Yeah,
I'll make a motion.
Steve, second.
I'll second.